Some people tend to think that good deeds are always performed by good people and evil deeds are performed by evil people. But we will find many examples where the people who are considered evil did so many great things for humanity. In this video, we are going to look at 10 good deeds performed by people who are considered evil. Number 10. Equality is something that all of us desire. We might remember Napoleon as a ruthless dictator, because any dictator who is hell-bent on capturing territories is bound to cause suffering. But there was one good, in fact a great aspect of his rule. Napoleon governed the conquered territories under strict laws that were based on equality. This Napoleonic code also forbade titles that are acquired at birth, which basically meant that your birth will not determine how good your life can be in the future. This is something one could never take for granted. Number 9. Let's talk about General Butt Naked. Yeah, you heard that right. He is actually named General Butt Naked, and he led the revolution in the African country of Liberia. This guy was an absolutely horrible person, and he was a symbol of terror in his era. He was infamous for parading his child soldiers naked to wars, and was also involved in a lot of rapes and cannibalistic rituals. But then came the time when he thought enough is enough. A realization hit the man, and he stopped with his animalistic activities. In 2006, he converted to Christianity and transformed into a good guy, taking care of child soldiers and making amends for his violent past. 360-degree turnaround, right? Number 8. Jim Jones was a leader of a notorious cult called People's Temple. He somehow convinced almost 1,000 members of the cult to commit suicide, which they all agreed to. Before he pulled this shit, he did a lot of good things in his life. He spoke against nuclear weapons and against racism. He was also the director of the Human Rights Commission in Indianapolis. This is ironic, right? Number 7. We remember Adolf Hitler as the most vicious man in history. This might be shocking for some people, but he had done a lot of good for humanity as well. Introducing a health program that saved the lives of 20,000 women would be a huge achievement for any politician. Well, unless that politician was Adolf Hitler, a man who infamously ordered the mass murder of at least 11 million people he considered undesirable, including Jews, homosexuals, gypsies, communists, and the disabled. A mere 20,000 really does pale in comparison. The health program in question was actually one of the earliest government anti-smoking campaigns. Hitler was obsessed with the idea of an Aryan master race and viewed smoking as a threat to the health of the German people. The anti-smoking program, that's impressive, right? Number 6. What is there to say about Genghis Khan that hasn't already been said about the bubonic plague? Erupting from the Mongolian steppe, his forces raced across Eurasia, destroying ancient empires and killing an estimated 40 million people. But Genghis wasn't just a destructive maniac. He was intent on building a Mongol nation. In 1208, he captured a Uyghur scribe named Tatar Tonga, who adapted the Uyghur alphabet to create the first alphabet for writing the Mongol language. The Khan also granted religious freedom to everyone within his empire and gave tax-exempt status to places of worship. He was known to be very spiritual himself, often praying before campaigns, and enjoyed discussing religion and philosophy with scholars like the Taoist Kui Chu-ji. We could not keep him out of the list because religious freedom is an essential thing. Number 5. Ashurnasirpal is considered one of the most brutal men in history. He once said, "I flayed as many nobles who had rebelled against me and draped their skins over the pile of corpses. Some I spread out within the pile, some I erected on stakes upon the pile. I flayed many right through my land and draped their skins over the walls." He was also known for burning his enemies alive, gouging out their eyes, or leaving them in the desert to die of thirst. But when not in a flaying mood, Ashurnasirpal could be quite generous to his subjects. Among other things, he threw them possibly the biggest party the ancient world had ever seen. Ashurnasirpal said, "I gave them food, I gave them drink, I had them bathed, I had them anointed. Thus I did honor to them and send them back to their lands in peace and joy." Talk about a party! Number 4. Muammar Gaddafi took power in a bloodless coup in 1969, but his regime cannot be considered bloodless. He is considered an evil personality by some people, but he was someone who could do anything to save his people and for the freedom of his people. During his regime, the people were happy, as under his leadership, Libyans did get free education, healthcare, and electricity, plus subsidized housing and transport. A man who was considered evil gave all the basic necessities to his people for free. Number 3. After taking power in 1959, Fidel Castro turned Cuba into a one-party dictatorship, forced tens of thousands of Cubans into exile, executed a number of dissidents, and threw many others into prison. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have described his government as one of the worst human rights abusers out there. But deplorable as Castro's rule was, he boasted of some genuine achievements. For example, the US and Cuba have roughly equal life expectancies, despite the US spending 20 times as much per capita on healthcare. This can be attributed to the national healthcare system put in place by Castro, which saw great success despite the fact that half of Cuba's doctors had fled the country immediately after he took power. In 1959, nearly a quarter of Cuba's adult population were illiterate. Today, adult illiteracy is almost non-existent. He gave land to landless farmers, created new housing to replace slums and shantytowns, and introduced a system of universal education. Number 2. Stalin also committed genocide and had millions killed, just because their ideologies didn't match his own. But he did write beautiful poetry, and since poetry is the food for the soul, it is optimistic to assume that he had a sliver of goodness in his heart. Number 1. During the reign of Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet, over 3,000 people were permanently disappeared. His regime also imprisoned tens of thousands and brutally tortured at least 28,000 of its perceived enemies. However, during his regime, wages grew and many sectors of Chile's economy were nationalized. He recruited a team of economists from the University of Chicago to restore economic stability to Chile. Trained under Milton Friedman, the Chicago Boys proposed a neoliberal economic policy, including the removal of trade barriers and state regulation of commerce, as well as low-income taxes and a program of privatization. That's all for today, folks. Hope you liked this video. Also, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, do not wait for it. And along with that, do press the bell icon to get yourself notified for more amazing videos. Till then, adios.